Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Subcommittee for the Armada Way Independent Learning Review Action Plan. Before we start proceedings, may I please bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit and meet at the fire assembly point in Civic Square. Please can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it is switched off when you are not using it and that your mobile devices are turned to silent. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Wallspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. I draw to the committee's attention the apologies for this meeting. Councillor Finn has submitted apologies. We've also received apologies from Councillor Rainsford and Councillor Blight is substituting. Moving on to item 2, can I seek nominations for a chair for the meeting?
Can I propose Sarah Allen?
Do we have a seconder? Yeah. Is everybody happy with that? Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Everyone hear me okay? It's working? Excellent, thank you. So, good afternoon. First of all, item 3, thank you, Hannah. So, this is just to note the co-option of Councillor Laura Maclay onto the committee as per the terms of reference for the subcommittee. Item 4, declarations of interest. Do any councillors present have any declarations of interest in respect of today's agenda? No? Excellent. Item 5 is a progress update on the action plan, and here I'll hand over to Liz Bryant, who's the Service Director for Legal Services, who's going to introduce the report. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. So as you all know, this is the first subcommittee meeting of this committee that's been set up to review the progress against the action plan, the Armada Way action plan. The key themes as set out in the report of the action plan are governance, project management and capital programme, consultation and engagement, environmental regulations and employee wellbeing. Each of those subheadings has got a number of actions against them, some that will be reported to this committee because of the deadlines for those actions to be progressed, and some to the next committee. The majority, the focus today will be on project management, consultation and engagement, and environmental regulations, with some of the other actions coming to the next committee. And in terms of progress, some of the actions are discrete items that can be completed and we can tick off as completed, but others are wholesale change which need to be embedded into the organisation, and will, for the time being, complete will look like we have a plan of how that's going to be delivered, how it will be implemented, and then taking that forward into implementation going forward. And Peter Honeywell is here. He'll give you a better idea of how that will work for project management. Alison will talk a bit more about how training will be embedded into the organisation as well. I'm going to run you through the governance section of the report, which is a brief update on this occasion and will be much longer next time. Each section will be dealt with by the matter expert. So I'm not sure how the committee wants to ask questions at the end of each topic, or whether you want to save them all to the end. So at the end of each topic, we'll pause and we'll leave it open for you to ask questions. So to progress with the governance points, first recommendation was to ensure that the role of the statutory officers was enhanced, and that we take shared responsibility. As you all know, the 3 statutory officers are the Chief Executive, the Monitoring Officer and the Section 151 Officer. As it happens, we'd already taken that step before the review happened, and we've been meeting regularly since March 2024. We meet on a monthly to 6-weekly basis, and have an agenda for each meeting and actions that we complete and report back at the end of each meeting. So we're ticking that off as complete. The next action that was up for completion by the time of this meeting was to review whether we should extend the rolling forward plan for council decision making. The review recommended something along the lines of 12 months. However, the statutory requirement is 28 days. So having undertaken a review of what other local authorities do and what's best practice to ensure effective decision making and keeping the process moving, rather than putting things on a forward plan that will never come to fruition, it was considered that somewhere in between that is the best way forward. So we're going to keep to the 28 days, but encourage decisions to be brought forward onto the forward plan a lot sooner, where we know they're big projects and that they should be on there for transparency purposes. And that's the way we propose to take that forward. In terms of the full governance review, the recommendations of the panel focused on some key themes around the use of urgent decision making, key decisions, the scheme of delegation and the governance of key boards. As a consequence of the review, a full health check of the constitution is being undertaken, but in the interim we're focusing on those key themes of urgent decision making and key decisions. The initial advice is that we look at, in terms of key decisions, we look at our thresholds for what becomes a key decision. At the moment it's £1 million revenue, £3 million capital, or significant impact on 2 or more wards. So it's just reviewing how those interplay together and whether those thresholds are effective for our decision making processes. We've reviewed how urgent decisions are taken, and put in place a method to ensure that urgent decisions are only taken in very extreme circumstances and are limited as far as possible. So they're now reviewed by the statutory officer, the 3 statutory officers, before any decision can be taken as urgent. So that's an action that's complete, and that's been working well since the review. And then we're in the process of identifying all the key boards that are in place within the constitution and without the constitution. So non-constitutional boards that are set up for project management, and we're looking at ensuring that they all have consistent and clear terms of reference to effectively manage the projects before them. And then finally we're reviewing, in terms of governance, we're reviewing the council's approach to scrutiny and how that interplays with cabinet, and just looking at ways to ensure that pre-decision scrutiny is effective, and that there's an effective split between the role of cabinet and the role of scrutiny. So we'll bring back some more, a further update on that at the next meeting. And finally, we are reviewing the approach to the pre-election period generally, firstly in terms of our pre-election guidance and how we approach it, how decisions are taken, how we treat business as usual. That's undertaking a full review, and we're awaiting advice on our approach and anything that we should change, and we'll bring that back to the committee in due course. Finally, so I thought that was finally, but training, so good governance training is underway. So we've undertaken a Team Plymouth training event for all officers that bring decisions forward. That was a half-day event that was delivered by an expert governance lawyer, an external lawyer, and it was quite an intensive lesson in what good governance looks like, and something will be brought forward shortly for a similar session for members, so that members can have an opportunity to understand the key themes. So we'll update you with a date on that in due course, and we'll bring you a further update on training from Alison shortly. So I think that's everything in terms of the governance. So any questions?
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Nicholson, I saw your hand first.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and Liz, thank you very much. An enormous amount of work has happened, isn't it, since the council made the resolutions to set this working group up. So well done, and thank you for all the efforts of you and all those that have been involved. No doubt there are other Jamie and probably Glenda and a whole host of other people, particularly around governance. The point I'd like to, just a couple of points I'd like to make, if I may, Chair. You know, ultimately the Constitution is the Bible, in essence, of how we operate. So that review is key, I think, to trying to ensure that you know, the lessons learned that we've talked about, and obviously we're going through at the moment, are embedded in the Constitution. So I just wanted to make a sort of an open suggestion that, given the fact that we're now engaging an external third party to look at the Constitution, whether there's an opportunity to invite from the 57 members of the council any comments that they may have on the Constitution, so that they can also be taken into account in conjunction with external advice that we have and the future debate that we're no doubt going to have in the Constitutional Review Forum panel when it's constituted. You know, that to a large extent members, and I suppose to a greater and lesser extent, use the Constitution to operate. So I think we could probably provide some useful observations and how, from our various positions, find the Constitution and how workable or unworkable it is in some respects. So I just think it would be useful just to canvass and give the ability for members to provide any views should they wish to. If they don't, then fine. But at least that can be fed in, and it can be a total review. So there was that, and what was the second?
Councillor Nicholson, was that actually a question?
It's not a question. It's not a question. It's an observation I make that I think I'd like the panel to take on board, and whether Liz, as the monitoring officer, could or would be prepared to send an email out seeking the views of members on any suggestions of change that they might like to see in the Constitution. So I'd phrase it in that respect. Sorry, there was one other matter I was just going to touch on. Yeah, so Liz, you know, we're looking forward obviously to the review of pre-election arrangements, which is scheduled for December. So thank you very much indeed.
Did you want to come back on that, or because I don't see any further hands up just now?
No, thank you, Chair. I think that's a suggestion. We'll look at how that could be managed practically, and we'll report back, and perhaps we can discuss it at the next Audit and Governance Committee. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on the governance? Okay, thank you, Liz. We'll now move on to the 5B part of item 5 on the project management, and Pete Honeywell as Transformation Architecture Manager. I believe you're introducing this one.
Thank you, Chair. So as in the format that Liz has just followed, the committee will note that the recommendations here cover two key findings, and I'll then try and explain how we're delivering on the actions to respond to those two findings. So I'll do them jointly, if I may, because I think that they're too integrally linked for me to break them out and talk to them separately. So the first recommendation was a corporate approach to project management, including oversight. And the second was to enhance risk awareness and indeed risk management, I think, across all of our works, including those in public places, and making sure that we're using the appropriate timing and methodology to deal with those risks in accordance with the nature and context of the project. So in response to this, we have taken an approach that starts with an understanding of growing levels of maturity. So the baseline response to the recommendations made in the report is one that is looking to implement what I would consider to be baseline standards across all of our capital projects and transformation work, so the internal works that the council undertakes on a routine basis. They cover how we govern projects, making sure that every project has an oversight board considering the work and delivery of the project team, and that board comprises a representative group that doesn't just include those that are delivering. It includes the stakeholders and the audience for whatever the asset is that's being created, or indeed the staff that are being impacted by the change. Those boards then feed up through a mechanism of escalation where they require to oversight that ultimately resolves itself at the corporate management team as far as officers are concerned, and ultimately goes to cabinet if required where issues are that significant. And that standard governance framework is being applied to all of our projects going forward as a baseline. And what we're doing right now is going around every one of our project and programme management teams in the council to make sure they understand that baseline standard. The second baseline standard that we're introducing is around risk management. We have identified the minimum characteristics that must be recorded against any risk. We've identified a process by which risks must be reviewed on a routine basis, and that review include all the stakeholders. So in other words, the risk log is made visible on a routine basis to the project board so that all stakeholders in the project have visibility and understanding of the risks the project faces and the mitigations being set out to address those risks. The third baseline standard is looking again at the way that we commission project work. That's the business case, fundamentally. There what we're looking to do is put specific requirements into our business cases such that the design for the change or the asset is properly thought through, that the costs reflected in the business case are not just those costs anticipated for delivery, but they reflect whole life costing thereafter. So we create assets and then have a maintenance schedule that follows that allows them to keep them in pristine condition. And we also are looking in business cases to make sure that we're tracking the decisions that are required where they are required for the delivery to take place against the schedule that's set out, making sure that we're linking back into some of the other recommendations around governance. So stage one of our maturity is about making sure those fundamental standards are in place with training that covers both those standards and then the evidence of those standards being put into effect. So we've defined the standards and we've also defined the evidence of those standards being followed, and that's being trained out at the moment. We're also introducing a corporate programme management office whose responsibilities will include the setting out of those standards and then the support of project teams to follow those standards, recognising that in some cases there are project teams that are perhaps doing smaller scale work where they're going to need some more support because it may not be that they're fully experienced in project and programme management. So support, and then the assurance function is the other component of the programme office that we're putting in place. Assurance meaning that where there are issues or risks that are coming up on those projects, that there is capability around the organisation to go and explore them in more detail and to provide back a view on some of the fundamentals and whether they're in place and whether or not we're managing the project as effectively as we could and should do. The third element of what we're doing at the moment then is about aligning these recommendations into the other recommendations in the report. It's quite hard to see them as entirely separate. Liz has already talked about some of the work in governance that reflects into the governance of projects and programmes, for example. So these things are being lined up across the recommendations. And then finally what we're doing is we will be using formal framework to assess our maturity as we go forward. So the review sets out some baseline and minimum standards, I think, for project and programme management. And what we're using going forward is a formal process of assessing the level of maturity that we're achieving across our projects, programmes and portfolios, and building increasing levels of maturity into that to create a centre of excellence around this. So I'll stop there and invite questions if I may.
Thank you, Pete. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Very informative. Can we just sort of slightly break it down? Certainly, the example of Armada Way then, the public realm improvements. Clearly, there's I would suggest there's a method of dealing with project management on a large scheme, and then there's obviously probably a separate method for small schemes, because to a large extent, the big schemes are involving external deliverers, and often the small schemes pretty much are project managed from internal staff. So in relation to the public realm works in the city centre, are you suggesting that we're the project manager, we as the local authority assessing all the risk, or is the framework that you're talking about where the contractor project manages, they project manage in relation to an agreed schedule with the local authority, and potentially there's a shared risk register for the public realm work? So perhaps you might like just to sort of amplify what you said in relation to the different types of projects that we do, small and large.
Thank you, Councillor. So you're absolutely right. We do operate, particularly in capital schemes, where contractors are invited, and indeed the benefits of using contractors is that you can transfer some of the risk into a contractor, as I'm sure you know. So yes, we would expect contractors to be following some basic standards as well, and indeed they generally do. I would also be saying, though, and our standards include some recommendations about how the council clients those contracts in an intelligent way that makes sure that we can see and have evidence of the contractors using the right methods in order to deliver their responsibilities to us. And there may be, and there are almost always in these kinds of situations, risks where either the contractor identifies them or the council identifies them, and there is a responsibility for the council to mitigate some part or all of that risk. In which case I would expect, even where we're contracting large pieces of work like this, that we would also have a risk log within the council that shows our responsibilities and accountabilities to manage those risks. So,
thank you. If I just come back on that, and this is where, this is a public forum, isn't it? This is where actually the council and councillors need to be privy and party to private discussions with officers at times around price, risk, and the management of some difficult contracts. So generally, are we in our price, and I'm talking generally here, in the price is a risk provision, or are we saying there's a risk register for which there's values on those risks, which if they come to fruition, if it's a council risk that we end up having to pay more money, but obviously there are risks that the contractor in delivering a scheme needs to handle, and they need to take the consequences of the realisation of those risks. And from a general point, Chair, I think councillors need to have far more handle on big schemes. Now, Glenn won't know my background unless he's spoken to colleagues. I've fulfilled numerous roles in this council over the years, including, being the deputy leader, and dealing with some very big schemes. I still don't, the day job I do, I don't have that level of involvement in council schemes. And I think councils at times need to be more challenging around the commercial arrangements of schemes. So I can't tell you, having been here for 31 years, what the basic terms and conditions are that a council contract third parties to do business on our behalf. And I do think, there does need to be an opportunity for councillors. I don't know the last time I was in a council committee where it went into part 2. When I first joined the local authority, there would be regular part 2 items. So I just think we need to be more challenging, but have an appropriate opportunity. So scrutiny, for instance, if a project came up, a significant project, there should be part 2 items.
Councillor Nicholson, is there a question in your contribution, please?
I asked a question, I'm just sort of generalising, because I think these are fundamental issues, Chair, that actually this review should tease out and give the ability for more member involvement. Now, there may be member involvement in terms of cabinet member, but in terms of scrutiny, there isn't. Because if you ask questions around the commercial construct of a project, you can't have that in public. So there does need, and from what you're saying, Peter, is there likely to be any opportunity for members to have more information available that is potentially, that will be part 2?
So I guess I focused primarily on the project management principles for this, which is clearly about risk and business cases and the setup and operation so that we get assurance on delivery of the outcomes rather than governance and some of the involvement of members through scrutiny. I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but I guess what you're talking to is the very point I made at the beginning here, which is none of these items sit independent of one another. But I think if we're to try and talk across the idea of business cases and risk transference in contracting and things around this, then I think it's less about project management and more about governance, if I may.
Yeah, there's certainly an overlap, isn't there? You know, none of these things are independent. They're all related to one another. But yeah, very useful. Thank you for bringing the report.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. If I may, I'd also just like to draw your attention back to the governance paper that Liz presented immediately prior to this one, which does talk about the review of the approach to scrutiny as well as cabinet. So that should be the body that will look through those issues that you raise. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to build on what Pete was saying, I think one of the benefits of having a capital programme monitoring office will be to kind of take a proportional response to some of those issues. So at the moment, the capital programme is very big and is delivered across a number of directorates and services. I think what Pete was saying about a programme office doing assurance will help manage that risk. So it would be a programme management office would be focusing on those capital projects which are of a certain scale, which have a certain risk profile. And by ordering them, I think that will make it easier for members and scrutiny committees to engage with those projects, because we can essentially do the work of narrowing down where do we need member engagement on particular areas of risk, whether that's projects, contracts, working with particular suppliers. Of course, we always try and do that as much as possible in part one, but where those are live commercial conversations, of course, there could and there should, I think, be an opportunity to move into part two where appropriate.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Just ask one quick. So are we going to employ within the local authority a risk specialist? Because it is a specialism in its own right. The assessment of risk in a project and how you deal with that is not, you know, it's for people with proper qualifications. So are we going to have somebody dedicated and knowledgeable on risk?
So the idea is that there are a number of professional disciplines, risk being one of them, that comprise a centre of excellence for the council on project and programme management that I've described. Rather than employing somebody in the corporate programme management office, what we've done is we've identified some of these professional disciplines and started to build a community of practitioners that have risk expertise. Risk in itself actually breaks down into sub-functions, as well as I'm sure you're aware. And we've got people, for example, who are extremely knowledgeable on costing of financial risks associated with transport schemes as one particular sub-function of this, who would be part of that community. You know, I would have a background actually in business transformation type risk and IT type risk, which is again different to some of the other risks. So we're building a community rather than an individual who has that responsibility, with a set of standards defined in the way that we manage all of the professional aspects of project management.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Councillor McClay?
Thank you. I'm looking back at the original report from Solace, and one of the issues that kept coming up was lack of resource in project management and the kind of way that your team has shrunk over the years. Has there been kind of any acknowledgement of that side of things, people resource, in this side of the process?
So the biggest acknowledgement I think we've come to is actually this recognition that our capital programme needs to be affordable for the council. Scaled obviously against the ambitions of the council, but the affordability of our programmes is the fundamental about this. And although people are one aspect of what comprises affordability, the other aspects are obviously contractors and other expenses on programmes. So I've not specifically addressed the fundamental of capacity directly by saying we must have this many people in. What I am hoping to address is that we will look at the overall portfolio of our work and scale that by commissioning new work that we can afford and have the capacity to deliver, rather than trying to build a capacity to meet some theoretical model for what we think we might be trying to do in future. So it's sort of looking at it the other way around, actually. Does that make sense? Good.
Councillor Nicholson.
Apologies, Councillor Allen, but I think these are very pertinent questions. So when you price a project, do you price in that resource that Councillor Clay has talked about, so that you can fundamentally procure that resource and that specialism, and it's properly accounted for in the price of the overall project?
So it's a mixed response to that. For projects that I might get involved in, for example, it's an opportunity cost rather than a direct cost of the council. So yes, we would include the visibility of my costs and my team's costs, but we wouldn't necessarily see that as an outflow from the council. For other projects where we're contracting third parties, that might be to buy systems, it might be to dig up roads, whatever the nature of the project is, absolutely the costs get in, alongside all of the other costs to deliver the outcomes that are required, including maintenance of the asset that is delivered at the end of the project.
That should provide some comfort, really, on Councillor McClay's point that for a decision of the council, it needs to be all-encompassing, including all the costs of those additional resources that, historically we may not be, at the moment, may not have the resource currently available.
Anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? No, thank you. Thank you very much, Pete, and also Glenn for your contribution there. We'll now move on to part C of item 5 on consultation and engagement, and I'd like to bring in Eleanor Firth, who's joining us online. Over to you, Eleanor.
Hello, thank you very much. Obviously, at the last committee, we actually tabled the engagement framework and the report. So since then, we have made, so I was asked today to come and give you an update on progress. And so since then, we've made significant progress in delivering the framework. The framework has been launched internally and is available to all staff with an easy to read guide. But in addition to that, we've created on our staff rooms, so on our intranet, a dedicated hub, and that has easy access to the frameworks. It's broken down into kind of easy sections, but it also has a lot more. So it has templates, it has guides, it has links to lots of external support, but it also has lots of additional case studies of examples of different types of engagement and consultation that we've carried out within the organisation, good engagement that we've carried out within the organisation, and we will continue to kind of grow that resource over the kind of weeks and months ahead. Obviously, a large aspect of the engagement framework was training. We're currently working with colleagues in HR to design a comprehensive training offer, which will include an e-learning module. And that is kind of underway and will be launched before the end of the year. We've also got a dedicated session for senior managers, which will be at the extended leadership team. It's on the agenda there for the next meeting. The community of practice, which was referenced within the framework, has been refreshed in terms of its membership. So the membership, so the community of practice are staff across the organisation who are involved in engagement and consultation activity. But at the moment, all the people who are on it are all the people who, trying to be diplomatic, who do it very well. So we are refreshing that so we can, and it is certainly not an exhaustive list across the organisation, to make sure that it encompasses as many officers as possible across the organisation that deliver engagement and consultation work. And that will be relaunched in January. Yes, that will be launched in January, but we're working with the current members of the community of practice to design a series of lunch and learn sessions. And the promotion for those will begin shortly, and they will cover kind of key aspects of the framework, such as, I'll give some examples, so for survey design, a session on good stakeholder mapping, a session on trauma-informed approaches, And these sessions will showcase best practice from within the organisation, but led by practitioners with specialist expertise. So colleagues from the community empowerment team who are trainers on trauma-informed approaches for engagement and consultation will lead those, etc. But obviously, as previously discussed at the last meeting, many of the actions within the framework do require that dedicated skilled resource, which the organisation doesn't have, which was highlighted obviously in the learning review. So the role profile for that dedicated resource has been developed, is currently going through the grading process. So we anticipate that we're going to be going out to recruitment in coming weeks. And that will be a corporate resource that will across the whole organisation, supporting the whole organisation. But many of the additional actions that I think we talked about at the last meeting with the framework will be rolled out once that new resource is in place, which I hope will be by the end of the year, certainly the beginning of next year. So whilst we're still on the journey, we've achieved a lot in quite a short time period without that dedicated resource. And encouragingly, we're already seeing staff engaging with the framework. We've seen a kind of a huge, an increase in people asking questions. People are seeking, certainly from a communications perspective, people seeking advice, people involving kind of comms at an earlier stage in projects that they're working on. So we're already seeing people starting to apply its principles in their work. But as I said, it is a journey to embed the framework meaningfully across the organisation. But I would say that while there's still work to do, I think that we are on a positive trajectory.
Excellent. Thank you, Eleanor. Does anyone have any questions for Eleanor before I bring in the Director for Growth? No? Glenn, I'll hand over to you now for your introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up the other item under the consultation and engagement section, which is the recommendation around creating a compelling and collaborative narrative for the city's vision. So a couple of months ago, there was an item at Cabinet that talked about a master plan for the city centre. We're actually calling it a city living framework because although it will be based in master planning and planning policy, we also have challenges about viability and markets in the city centre. So it will be as much about infrastructure, what kind of city people want to live in the future, how we move what could be quite a dry master planning exercise into and why do people want to live in this city. We're doing that through the auspices of our partnership with Homes England, which, as members will know, we have an MOU with that organisation, which is already bearing fruit on a number of large housing schemes. At Cabinet, we talked about how we were going to procure that and start in the autumn. The interviews for the final bidders for that contract are in mid-November. We have made sure that public consultation, stakeholder consultation, an outward-looking approach to engaging across the city is built into that tender specification. We'll certainly be looking for that to come through strongly in the proposals that we score. So we are looking to appoint someone hopefully by the end of November and then move very quickly into that master planning exercise that will probably take about 12 months and then come back through in its own right the scrutiny and Cabinet approval process.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
So just on that, Glenn, and I think I raised this in housing and community scrutiny. When's the council actually going to sense check the principles that they wish to achieve in the city centre with the public and wider community, including members? Because what we're embarking on is actually not recognising the issues from the Armada Way public realms works, which effectively didn't get the public and didn't get some members on board at a very early stage, but it all came at the very last moment. We're going to repeat the whole exercise of commissioning work based on high-level decisions within the council. Going to spend 12 months developing that strategy, which is not just going to be principles, it's going to be some detailed strategy, which for all intents and purposes to a member of the public is, well, it's a done deal. What's the point of actually commenting on a very detailed plan when you've never even consulted me on the principle. And I have to say, I absolutely struggle with 10,000 homes in a city centre, which will massively alter the landscape of the city centre without some discussions about principle. It seems far-fetched, Chair, that you can accommodate 10,000 people in the retail centre of this city. Now, you may be able to, Glenn. I'm not an architect, but actually, we've not even engaged on a high-level discussion with councillors representing the public or the public. So, you know, I welcome the update, but I think we're following the same critical route that we did on the Armada Way public realm.
So is there a question in there? Because I also think that this issue
Just
is more of a matter for scrutiny rather than this forum today.
This isn't all about asking questions, it's also about giving comment. And what I've said to Glenn then is, do you think we're effectively barking on the same process that we've just failed on the Armada Way public realm works?
So just to answer that question, what we will do is make sure that the piece of work that we commission complies with the consultation and engagement strategy that Ellie's just outlined. It's a 12-month piece of work. That doesn't mean that we'll be doing all of the work behind the scenes during 11 months and then having a big reveal at the end. So what we'll be doing is building consultation points in throughout that process with stakeholders and residents. So I think you can expect to see, as members, updates on that as we go along. It won't be a case of a big reveal. We want to take stakeholders, members, residents on the journey of that piece of work as it develops.
Thank you, Chair. That's very welcoming. Thank you.
Any further questions on part C of item 5? Thank you very much. And thank you, Eleanor, for joining us today as well. Move now on to 5D. Glenn, this is also your item, I believe, on the environmental regulations.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. There were two things I was going to cover here specifically. One was, obviously some of this happened before I was in post, and there's a recommendation around reviewing the training that we've already done on some of the environmental impact assessment and regulation, particularly for planning officers. So I set out in the report just to say that training has taken place within the planning service and wider with an external training provider, an expert in that area. All of the senior planners and managers attended that session. The materials produced for that are still available and being used across the organisation. My assessment of that is that was fit for purpose and appropriate for where we are against the Armada Way learning review. However, of course, regulations change. We have staff turnover, so we will be reviewing that at regular intervals to make sure that that training's still appropriate. Where it needs to be updated and where legislation's changed, we will think about running that session again to make sure planning officers are absolutely up to date on the latest requirements. The second piece on there was around tree management principles, and I know this came up at full council to some extent in a bit broader sense. So we're currently in the process of creating the tree management principles document. It's drafted, it's going through an internal process across the council, working with officers to further revise it. It will then be shared with the Plan for Trees steering group before coming to scrutiny, I think on December the 3rd, to Natural Infrastructure and Growth, and then on into the new year, coming back to Cabinet. So that is all happening. It's one of those actions that can't just be ticked off and done. It's an iterative process. We're doing it properly. That's why it's taking a bit of time to do. But as you can see in the report, it's coming through the system, and Scrutiny Committee will get a chance to look at that in detail in about a month's time.
Thank you. Any Questions on this item, either on the tree management principles policy or the rest of the environmental regulations? No, thank you, Glenn. So we'll now move on to Part E of item 5. This is employee wellbeing, and I'd like to introduce Alison Mills, Head of HR, to present this one.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I'll try not to overlap with what I'll say in the training element. So I think really on this element, the big piece of work that we've been doing is the complete review of our people strategy. And that's been led by Chris Squire, our Service Director for HR and OD, and that is going to Cabinet on the 10th of November. In doing that review and development, there's been a huge amount of employee engagement with forums taking place, with Chris very much understanding the concerns and thoughts of employees and making sure that we do cover those in our people strategy for the next few years. So very much it is about the development of managers, and I won't say any more on that because I'll repeat myself in the next part. We're very much wanting to employees to be able to raise concerns. We obviously already do have policies in place, whether it's whistleblowing, grievance resolution, and all our normal employment policies. We are having a dignity at work policy that we're developing at the moment, so we hope to enhance those areas within that policy. Within our health and safety performance standards, we do have violence and aggression standard, and that's incorporating the unacceptable behaviour policy side of things. In terms of the safety of employees, we're very much now in a procurement process for personal alert devices for those employees in higher risk areas, with procurement taking place. And also within our health and safety management system, we are now incorporating a dangerous sites database within that, again, so we're able to understand what those are. So I think that's really a summary of all the areas within this section.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? I'll bring Councillor Macleay first and then Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing all of that with us. What I'm hearing is really positive. I think this is one of the areas that I was really focused on. You know, our staff make this organisation, they're carrying out all that work. It's a huge area for us. One of the things I remember from the original report was that feeling of staff feeling isolated and not part of the council culture. And I hope to see that shifting. One of the things I'm curious of, how are we tracking employee satisfaction? How are we checking that we're kind of reaching these milestones, breaking those barriers down, and not kind of allowing those silos that led to some of these issues to kind of bed in further? And do we have any kind of tracking of employee awareness of those policies are there to help them in times of need as well?
So in terms of our approach to employee satisfaction, previously every few years we've done a council-wide employment survey, if that makes sense, whereas the approach being taken now is going to be more frequent pulse surveys, so small areas and then sort of a deeper dive, if that makes sense. So we've done one on wellbeing, and we're looking at one. Those results are being analysed at the moment, and then there's the next one I think is going to be on leadership. So again, we've got a series of surveys that way. So that was the first part of the question, and the second part of your question was
awareness of policies.
Right. So again, we do launch policies, and we have a various cascade effect. And we'll do various briefings and training depending on the size of the policy. We have our staff intranet where we sort of summarise the policy areas, and I think we're wanting to do more with sort of quite snappy recordings. When people need to do something, they can quickly go and see the recording and listen to what they need to be doing. And the other area in terms of has every employee seen the policy and read the policy? We now will have that ability with our new HR system, iTrent, where there's a much bigger onboarding and induction area within it. And within that, we're hoping to have, I'll call it e-signature, that's probably the wrong terminology, but people will be able to tick that they've read and they've understood something, which is more comprehensive than we've had before.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Alison. Very simple request. Could you actually circulate a copy of the unacceptable behaviour policy, please?
Yes, it's the health and safety standard for violence or aggression is the actual title.
Fine.
So,
Yeah. Is it relatively slim, or is it a great thick manual?
I couldn't. It's not a thick manual, but they're sorry. It's not many pages, but it's not a couple of pages. Our health and safety standards. Yeah.
No, it'd be just useful to have appreciation of what was contained in it. Thank you.
Any other questions on this section? Okay, if not, we'll move on to training and development plan, which is also Alison. Thank you.
Okay, so I think obviously the training and development encompasses every section that we've spoken about today, and there has been reference to training and development. But I think if I just quickly sort of categorise the major things we're doing at the moment, which will be a tiny bit repetitive, but at least you'll get the true picture. So again, obviously the overarching element to any of our training and development is our people strategy, and that is going to Cabinet on the 10th of November. The big piece of training or development that we've done this year is we've launched a new management development training, level 5 for managers and aspiring managers. And actually, if we look at the number of employees that we've supported through this training, the first cohort, it was 100, and they're just finishing off and having their celebration of completion in a week or so. And there's a second cohort of 100 starting in January 26. So that's 200 managers going through the level 5. And then we have a level 3 level, so more team leader supervisory element, and we have 65 team leaders going through that at the moment. As a result of this, we'll always be identifying additional training and development needs. So there are going to be additional modules. As we've mentioned, the governance training is going to be one, and also giving managers some of the softer skills in empathy and those sort of things as another module. And then as time goes on, when we're feeling managers need identification of additional training needs are come through, we'll design further modules as necessary. Again, the other area that we're reviewing at the moment is our mandatory training. So we're going through and looking at which areas of training are mandatory, when they need to be done by an employee, and when they need refresher training. So someone that's been here a long time, you know, it might be a very long time ago that they undertook some of the training. So that is currently being presented to CMT. Liz has mentioned the governance training, so that's been a session with ELT in September with an external trainer. And then the other big area of training that's happening at the moment is the design of e-learning. So the sort of topics, I probably won't cover them all, but it's including the Nolan principles. It's looking at project management at various levels, whether it's project management awareness, foundation, project management foundation and advanced. There is going to be training, as Ellie mentioned, on the engagement and communications framework. So those are the sort of main areas of e-learning going on. As Liz mentioned, there's the LGA training, which is going to be joint manager and member training. And again, the other areas where we can make sure some of these essential principles come through are when we're doing induction. So we're looking at chief officer induction, and we're looking at manager induction to make sure we get all those things across. And I think that's the main things we're covering at the moment.
Thank you. Any questions on this, on the training and development plan? Okay, so as this is under review and some sections of it have been completed, are committee happy to note the progress made so far to date against the matters that have been reported? Excellent. And also I'd like to ask the committee to consider if any recommendations are required in relation to the implementation of this and whether there are any matters which need to be escalated back to the Audit and Governance Committee. Councillor Sproston?
Yes, it's a bit of a tangent, but bear with me. I appreciate that we've kind of asked questions on the various topics that have been up for discussion, but I was wondering if there's kind of questions that we could put forward which are kind of more generalised ones on things that maybe are missing from this report that I would like to just kind of comment before maybe we go into potential actions or recommendations, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, so it's a generalised question. I mean, we've gone through kind of governance, project management, and all these various things in great depth, and I think it's very good with all the actions that have come forward. One of the things I wanted to just kind of highlight is in regard to kind of the risk register. And my question is more based around some of the businesses. We haven't really talked about, you know, Armada Way with the businesses that were struggling due to the kind of lengthy legal processes. And there was nothing in this kind of report that talked about that I saw. Talking about the kind of risk, my understanding of risk in regards to their kind of suffering. And I was wondering, is that something that we're looking to put into this report? Because I appreciate this is a progress update, essentially. But I was just wondering, is that a topic that's going to come to light as we move forward?
I mean, this obviously we're constrained by the Armada Way Learning Review report and the action plan that was submitted to full council. So that's the matters that are before you and that will be focused on there. There was nothing in the report that dealt with that. I mean, obviously we'll take that comment away, and senior officers are here can consider those points and look into them. But okay,
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to put anyone on the spot because we are reflecting on what's been presented in front of us. But yeah, it's something I'd like us to maybe consider if that's okay.
Thank you. Glenn, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, not to cut across anything Liz has said, but just to say that when Ellie was running through the new guide to consultation and engagement, that does include consulting and engaging with businesses. So I think some of that has been picked up, whether it's to the extent that members would like and whether it's specific enough, we can look at. But there is a section in there about businesses that certainly we're looking at for future projects and applying that in line with the new policy and guidance.
Anybody else? Anything that potentially needs to be escalated to Audit and Governance Committee from this? Councillor Nicholson.
We're just in the process, aren't we? So I think as we have another meeting or two, then you probably will be recommendations. But you know, I don't think there is anything from today's meeting from my perspective.
Okay. If we're all in agreement, then I will move on to the work programme, which is on pages 41 to 52 of your packs, and also to any questions about that one? Comments? No, if not, then I'd like to ask you to note the date and time of the next meeting of this committee, which is at 10 o'clock on the 11th of December 2025. Hopefully see most of you there. Thank you to Councillor Blight and Councillor Maclay for attending today as well. And thanks to the officers, and I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you.